Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm doing another video. I'm reading a short story this time. It's not a creepypasta, but it's a really good short story. So I decided I'm gonna read it. It's called AIDS. So here we go. It was a normal Friday in school. I had just gotten out of gym class where we played soccer, and I was headed to lunch. Having D lunch is terrible. You get the microwave leftovers of other lunches, have to wait until after fourth hour to eat, and the tables are always dirty. Being in the gyms before lunch means I'm right next to the lunchroom when I get out, so I always get to be one of the first to get food. I looked at the choices and saw buffalo wrap. Oh shit, that sounds fucking great, I thought to myself. As soon as I walked up to the counter, I caught a whiff of that spicy sauce. It was strong as fuck. I got my food and eventually found my way to my friends at a table. Unfortunately, I hadn't realized one tiny carton of delicious chocolate milk wasn't enough to cool down the intense burn I was feeling. I then found my way to the Royal Snacks line to get a larger milk. Once I found my way back to my table, I realized the milk was already open. Immediately, Abby shouted, "AIDS!" I shrugged and took a swig. I could feel it in my bones already. Suddenly, I was propelled to talk to Natalie, like, oh my god, crushed doors, and got her phone number. Suddenly, I felt my bones bubbling, and I turned into a rocket and shot to Pluto. Well, okay, I think I found another really good short story. It's called A Horrible Short Story, but I found it to be quite nice and uplifting. So here we go. There was once a wicked, cruel man who was known throughout the land for his evil ways. He was a true monster. All who met him wished they didn't, and those who were fortunate enough to never have their paths cross with his were truly lucky. One day this man was out walking, plucking flowers before they could bloom in order to try and brighten up his castle. Okay, so we got this big evil creature, and what's the first thing we see him doing in the story? Yeah, picking flowers. Alright, yeah, no, it's okay, right, reasonable. Okay, so, for you see, his land was covered in darkness. He snatched up everything that had some sort of beauty and hid it away so it was his and his alone. It was out on this stroll that he saw her, one of the prettiest girls he had ever seen. A plan began forming in his mind immediately. He waited until the girl was alone, and he convinced her, with honey-sweet voice, that she should visit his castle. Being the trusting girl she was, she followed, never thinking that any harm could come to her. She never saw the light of day again. He locked her away in one of his many towers. No prince came to save her, no knight in shining armor. She simply wasted away in the tower, her beauty fading with every passing day. Then, after many years, she said to herself, "No, I'm not going to stand for this any longer. I used to be pretty, and although that was taken from me, I can still claim what little life I have left." So she made her stand. She threw open the door and began running down through the many hallways and passages to the outside. She tripped down a case of stairs, but it barely even slowed the girl down. One of the guards spotted her and sounded the alarm. Before she knew it, arrows had lodged themselves in her legs and back. After 8 such shots, she fell to the ground bleeding. Yeah, okay. It was then the wicked man knelt down and looked at the girl, really looked, as she bled to death on his floor. He tried to see into her soul, into her essence, and he said slowly, realization dawning on his face, "You never were that pretty." And that's the end. So, what an asshole. Alright, so I just went to this website that has a bunch of children's short stories, and I found one that's called Mr. Sticky. I gotta admit, the name kind of caught my attention, so here we go. No one knew how Mr. Sticky got in the fish tank. "He's very small," Mum said as she peered at the tiny water snail. "Just a black dot." Yeah, alright. "He'll grow," said Abby, and pulled her pajama bottoms up again. Yeah. Before she got into bed, they were always falling down. In the morning, Abby jumped out of bed and switched on the light in her fish tank. Jerry, the fat orange goldfish, was dozing inside the stone archway. Jaws was already awake, swimming along the front of the tank with his white tail floating and twitching. It took Abby a while to find Mr. Sticky because he was clinging to the glass near the bottom, right next to the gravel. At school that day, she wrote about the mysterious Mr. Sticky, who was so small you could mistake him for a piece of gravel. Some of the girls in her class said he seemed an ideal pet for her and kept giggling about it. That night, Abby turned on the light to find Mr. Sticky clinging to the very tiniest, waviest tip of the pondweed. It was near the water filter, so he was bobbing about in the air bubbles. "That looks fun," Abby said. She tried to imagine what it must be like to have to hang on to things all day and decided it was probably very tiring. She fed the fish, then lay on her bed and watched them chase each other round and round the archway. When they stopped, Jerry began nibbling at the pondweed with his big pouty lips. He sucked Mr. Sticky into his mouth and then blew him back out again in a stream of water. The snail floated down to the bottom of the tank among the colored gravel. "I think he's grown a bit," Abby told her mom at breakfast the next day. "Just as well if he's going to be gobbled up like that," her mom said, trying to put on her coat and eat toast at the same time. "But I don't want him to get too big or he won't be cute anymore. Small things are cute, aren't they?" "Yes, they are, but big things can be cute too, if you know what I mean." "Now hurry up, I'm going to miss my train." At school that day, Abby drew an elephant. She needed 2 pieces of expensive paper to do both ends, but the teacher didn't mind because she was pleased with the drawing and wanted it on the wall. They sellotaped them together right across the elephant's middle. In the corner of the picture, Abby wrote her full name, Abigail, and drew tiny snails for the dots on the eyes. The teacher said that was very creative. At the weekend, they cleaned out the tank. "There's a lot of algae on the sides," Mom said. "I'm not sure Mr. Sticky's quite up to the job yet." They scooped the fish out and put them in a bowl while they emptied some of the water. Mr. Sticky stayed out of the way, clinging to the glass while Mum used a special vacuum cleaner to clean the gravel. Abby trimmed the new pieces of pondweed down to size and scrubbed the archway and the filter tube. Mum poured new water into the tank. "Where's Mr. Sticky?" Abby asked. "On the side," Mum said. She was busy concentrating on the water. "Don't worry, I was careful." Abby looked on all sides of the tank. There was no sign of the water snail. "He's probably in the gravel then," her mom said. "Come on, let's get this finished. I've got work to do." She plopped the fish back in the clean water where they swam round and round, looking puzzled. That evening, Abby went up to her bedroom to check the tank. The water had settled and looked lovely and clear, but there was no sign of Mr. Sticky. She lay on her bed and did some exercises, stretching out her legs and feet and pointing her toes. "Stretching was good for your muscles. It made you look tall," a model had said on the TV, and she looked enormous. What? When Abby had finished, she kneeled down to have another look in the tank, but there was still no sign of Mr. Sticky. She went downstairs. Her mom was in the study, surrounded by papers. She had her glasses on, and her hair was all over the place where she'd been running her hands through it. She looked impatient when she saw Abby in the doorway, and even more impatient when she heard the bad news. "He'll turn up," was all she said. "Now off to bed, Abby. I've got masses of work to catch up on." Abby felt her face go hot and red. It always happened when she was angry or upset. "You've hoovered him up, haven't you?" she said. "You were in such a rush you hoovered him up." "I have not. I was very careful. But he is extremely small." "What's wrong with being small?" "Nothing at all, but it makes things hard to find." "Or notice," Abby said, and ran from the room. The door to the bedroom opened, and Mum's face appeared around the crack. Abby tried to ignore her, but it was hard when she walked over to the bed and sat next to her. She was holding her glasses in her hand. She waved them at Abby. "These are my new pair," she said. "Extra powerful for snail hunting." She smiled at Abby. Abby tried not to smile back. "And I've got a magnifying glass," Abby suddenly remembered and rushed off to find it. They sat beside each other on the floor. On their knees, they shuffled around the tank, peering into the corners among the big pebbles at the gravel and the pondweed. "Aha!" Mom suddenly cried. "What?" Abby moved her magnifying glass to where her mom was pointing. There, tucked in the curve of the archway, perfectly hidden against the dark stone, sat Mr. Sticky. And right next to him was another water snail, even smaller than him. "Mrs. Sticky," Abby breathed. But where did she come from? "I'm beginning to suspect the pondweed, don't you think?" They both laughed and climbed into Abby's bed together. "Ha ha! cuddling down under the duvet. It was cozy, but a bit of a squeeze. Budge up, Mom said, giving Abby a push with her bottom. I can't, I'm already on the edge. My goodness, you've grown then. When did that happen? You could have put an elephant in here last time we did this. Abby put her head on her mom's chest and smiled.
The end.
Well, I guess that's all the stories I can do for today. So, yeah, tell me what you think. That's all for now. See ya.